Writers from all over the world come to Cork every year for its International Short Story Festival, where up-and-coming talents rub shoulders with some of the biggest names in literature.
Nobody's been to New Zealand? Oh, well, you'll have to get your parents to take you there. Especially the girls, because our boys are very handsome.
Witi Ihimaera's stories generally portray Maori culture and the problems of contemporary New Zealand. His novel, The Whale Rider, was made into a critically acclaimed film. He has written 15 novels and published 17 short story collections, including various works for children. Witi, why do you think that a dedicated short story festival like the festival here in Cork is important for the survival of the short story?
Well, first of all, there aren't that many in the world, and the one in Cork is one of those ones which a lot of writers are very, very keen to come to, because the writing of the short story itself is in threat.
There's a lot of talk about the short story undergoing a renaissance and a comeback. Do you think that this idea of the renaissance in the short story is untrue?
I think that renaissance is happening on the internet, and I also think it's happening in magazines. But when it comes to individual collections by single authors, most publishers, at least in New Zealand anyway, they would prefer that writers write novels. Which is a pity, really, because a lot of people still want to read the short story. There's a quality about the short story that really defines a writer in a way that a novel doesn't.
The Maori, like the Irish, have a strong oral culture of storytelling. Do you think that has an impact on why we're allegedly so good at the short story form?
I think it's because we are alive. You know, we like to deal with words. We like to deal with the rhythms of words. We like to think about words in an oral as well as oral way. So when I became a short story writer, what I was trying to do was to recreate within a written narrative what was already there in an oral narrative.
What can the short story achieve that the novel can't?
Because the short story requires a certain kind of perfection that the novel doesn't, it can show in a moment what will take a novel 400 pages to do. It can show a flash of illumination. It can show a strike of lightning in an extremely intense way that over a novel might be something that builds slowly. And I love those moments of illumination when they come to me when I read other people's work, and I hope that they find the same thing. In Māori, we call it the wero. We like to have a spear thrust through our stories. And so whenever people read my stories, I hope that in the end that there is this spear thrust, this wero, which strikes them in the heart.
D.W. or Dave Wilson's stories have appeared in literary magazines across Britain and his native Canada. The 27-year-old is the youngest ever winner of the BBC National Short Story Award.
I grew up in the middle of nowhere in small town Canada, son of a Mountie, and my mom flips houses. I planned to go to school, study writing as an undergrad, and then switch to law.
Your first book, Once You Break a Knuckle, was a short story collection. Why did you start with short stories and not the novel?
As far as writing the short story goes, I like that there are rules and there are conventions and there are limitations in the short story that you have to push against and move with and puzzle through. Where the novel, those conventions and limitations don't really exist. A novel is very free, so you can kind of go wherever you want with it. And I actually like that limitation in the short story. I like playing with it. When you read a good short story, that is so cohesive and that it fits together, and it's just so satisfying that it's consumed as like an artistic unit that's so connected and so tight.
Do people assume that the short story, because of its brevity, is easier or faster to write?
It's just a different kind of writing. It's a much closer, a much more inspected way of writing. You have to because you've every sentence is proportionally so much more of the piece of work than in a novel, every sentence has to be that much tighter and that perfect in order to, and otherwise, like a sentence out of whack in a short story, it's like, you're just like, oh, that's a crap sentence. And where in a novel, that's okay, you can have that, and people will go, yeah, but look how great the plot is, or look at this characterization.
There's a lot of talk about the short story undergoing something of a renaissance due to e-readers and the internet. Do you think that's the case?
Everyone talks about the short story being revived, but I wonder if it ever really died. I think it might have had a bit of a slump, maybe had a nap. In Canada, at least, certainly, it's not really gone away. It's still celebrated. Yeah, so I think the profile is increasing, which is good.